What is it about this deck? Hello, it's Dawn Michelle from Boho Tarot, and today and through all of February, I am going to be working on getting to know the Deviant Moon Tarot. This is obviously the borderless edition. So I've resisted this deck. And honestly, all of Patrick Valenza's decks, although I think he's an amazing artist and the artwork is super cool, I just never really got the appeal in terms of a tarot deck. And I feel like I'm the only one. I'm the only one in the world who does not get this deck and what all the hype is about it. So, in all transparency, after buying this deck, I was looking at Patrick Valenza's website and looking at some of the other decks in his collection that he's created. And I was like, I'm really more drawn to the color palette of the classic Trionfi della Luna. And then I saw there was the new illustrated, and I don't think there was any images, but it was like the Trionfi della Luna illustrated. And I was like, well, heck, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it, and let's do that one. So I pre-ordered it, and I think it said it was due to release in April. So me, not really having any sort of a connection to this type of artwork or this deck, pre-ordered another deck sight unseen. So I don't know what that says, but I feel like that color palette might be in a little bit more alignment with my personal style. But I have this one currently, and I do want to know what all the fuss is about. So I decided to go ahead and pick up a copy of the Deviant Moon Borderless Edition at long last, right? We've all seen this deck. I hear people talk so fondly about this deck that I'm like, I have to know what the deal is with this deck. So I'm going to go on a little adventure, and I'm going to attempt to bond with the Deviant Moon Tarot, and I thought I would just take you along for the ride. So as I go through my work with this deck and taking it through sort of my bonding practice that I tend to do with new decks, I thought I would just take you along for the ride and share the experience with you. So I'll be kind of clipping this all together into hopefully one beautiful seamless video at the end of the whole experience. Or it'll be a gigantic fail and this video will never see the light of day. Either way, let's go ahead and take a look at the cards because I just want to know. So if you've seen walkthroughs of the Deviant Moon Tarot, this is not what this is going to be. This is going to be my initial first impression. This is actually sort of my second impression, to be perfectly honest, because I did kind of talk about this deck a little bit with my weavers when I first got it, and I was trying to decide what I wanted to do with it. This is where I ended up. So I have kind of quickly looked through this deck before, but I haven't really dove into it. So that's what I'm going to do to start off with, right? I'm just going to kind of go through the cards and take a look at the imagery. This art style is not normally my favorite. It is super cool. It's very it feels very 90s to me, which in general, I'm like super on board with because I'm a product of the 90s. And that was like, my heyday teen years into my 20s. And yeah, I'm a sucker for anything 90s. So in that sense, I'm kind of like, this does have a bit of a cool 90s feel to it, which I do kind of dig. But yeah, like the artwork really doesn't speak to me. This High Priestess is super cool. I do love the very steampunky vibe to this. I'm almost wondering if I kind of paired it with my steampunk tarot, if that would maybe help me kind of make a little bit better connection to it. But this deck is weird, right? We know it's weird. That's its thing. It's supposed to be weird. I think it is kind of meant to unsettle you a little bit. But I think that there's also a bit of humor here because look, he's standing on the bowl. And I do appreciate that in a deck. And so that's kind of where I'm going to try to lean into, is a little bit more of the kind of left of center humor that is in this deck versus the just strange, I don't get it artwork. This is a very Waitsmith inspired deck, so I should be able to read with it in that sense, but the artwork just, it doesn't, like, I don't feel anything when I'm looking at it, right? And this is just me being honest in my honest opinions. So many times when we show decks, or when I show decks on my channel, I'm like gushing over them. I'm like, oh my goodness, it's the most beautiful thing in the world, and I absolutely love it, and it's gonna be my favorite deck ever, right? That is not this deck. This is not a absolute favorite. This is not, I think it's the most beautiful deck in the world. I think it's super cool, and it's super different and super interesting. Like, she's got multiple arms here, and we're standing on these, I don't know what these are, alligator like fishy things. I really want to read the little white book. I know there's a big guidebook that goes with this too, or a big art book, which I almost picked up, but I didn't because it's very expensive, and I don't know that I'm going to connect with this deck to the level that I want to invest that kind of money in it, which I know is super, super ridiculous considering I've already invested money in the Triumph della Luna Illustrated, but I'm sure if I don't connect with that deck, somebody else will connect with it for me. This Hermit, I do not get this Hermit. I've heard Lisa talk about this Hermit before, and maybe I need to read the little guidebook. Maybe I need to spend some time working with it, but this Hermit to me looks terrified, and that's not how I see the Hermit energy. So that one I'm curious to work with. I do love this Wheel of Fortune with the freaking flying monkey up there. That's awesome. Okay, I do love that. That so far is my favorite card. This Strength card is interesting, but again, I'm like, I don't know, this deck is just not an intuitive, it doesn't spark any intuitive hits for me, so I'm going to be curious to see how it turns out. I do really love this card. I think it's really just a stunning illustration. And I do quite like the Temperance card. The one thing I do really like about this deck is that there aren't any real people. Like, these are strange characters. There's not really any people. So I feel like when I'm looking through this deck, I'm not sitting here going, does this reflect my world, right? Because no, it doesn't. It more reflects a weird dream that could be maybe a nightmare, but isn't quite, if that makes sense. This is going to be a weird video. I hope you're in for it. This is a weird deck. We're going to do a weird video. I love this. Like, is this a spaceship? Because I'm all on board for that. The spaceship shining the light down into the tower. That's super cool. I do quite like this star, but the little tentacly things out of her head kind of gives me the willies a little bit. And the moon. I do like the kind of puppet energy in the moon. I really do feel like the moon, at least for me, it definitely affects the way that I feel and the way that I react and the way that I respond to things. So I do kind of dig that. So this is one of those cases where I feel like this is a deck that I need to sit with, that I need to work on bonding with, because it's not an instant connection, but that doesn't mean that it won't be worth it in the end. We shall see. I guess you will know by the end of this video, and I will know by the end of the month. So here we have the sun. Again, it doesn't do a whole lot for me. Same with the Judgment, but it's cool. Like, it's super cool. I could say that about every card though. Every card is super cool. I've left this in the order that it came in, which is a little bit different. It's like backwards than how I would normally go through a deck, but we're gonna roll with it. So here's our King of Swords, our King and Queen. I do love that they look like a pair, and they do have a little bit of a Marseille feel to them, which is cool because I do really like the Marseille quartz. So here's our Knight. And our Page, again, you can see that really steampunk energy coming through, which I do love, because when in the 90s, when I was like in my late teens, early 20s, I was very into steampunk stuff. Like, I went through a whole steampunk phase. So in that sense, this deck really does kind of appeal to that and kind of tap into that nostalgia energy a little bit. This card's a little rough. It's a little rough for the Ten of Swords, but it's very, very it's not traditional in its depiction, but it's very traditional in its meaning, I think. Again, I haven't read the guidebook. I haven't really, because every time I see this deck, and you know, I've never really watched a proper walkthrough of this deck, mostly because I've kind of always had it in my head that I might want to check it out myself, and I don't want to say influenced by others, but I want to kind of get my initial first impressions, which is what we're doing here today. I will at some point throughout this month watch some walkthroughs on this deck to get some different ideas, some different interpretations and reflections from some other people who I really admire the way that they approach tarot and the way that they work with their cards, because that I find is very, very helpful when I'm trying to connect with the deck, or just trying to get to know it even better. Again, I love how the moon is like really influencing all the characters here. I think that's super cool. But again, this is just like, it's weird. It's weird. Do I get it? No, not totally. And this is totally not to diss the deck or the creator or anybody who loves or associates with this deck. This is just me going through my honest bonding practice with the deck. And this is what I do. I go through the deck and go, oh, I like that, and I don't like that, and this is weird, and that's really cool, and this is just how it goes. This is super cool. I love that she's under the ground. But we have all of these lights coming out of her head. Like from this moment of stillness and reflection, there's going to be illumination. I mean, that's like super cool. I don't know if that's even the thing, but that's just what came to mind for me. This Three of Swords, very traditional. Do we know how I feel about the Three of Swords? It's heartbreak. It's not heartbreak for me, so I have a hard time with that one, but I do like this. This really depicts the idea of being of two minds, and I think that is super cool. I do really like that. Interesting aces, nice depiction or departure from the kind of just traditional hand in the air holding the very phallic looking items. Thinking of Pixie's wands. That's what's coming to mind. So here's our King of Wands. I mean, it's pretty cool. This Queen of Wands is really cool. She feels very much in her power, which is awesome. The Knight of Wands. The bug on the bug. That's kind of cool. It is the bug. Is it the bug? It's not riding the bug. It is the bug. Kind of they're joined. That's really interesting. There could be some interesting things you could, you know, really tap into with that. Page of Wands. Walking on stilts. Are they walking on ice? That's interesting. See, this is why we need to go through the decks. This is why you can't always let your just initial first reaction be the only thing that you rely on, because sometimes you just, at least for me, for one, sometimes I don't have any freaking clue until I get a deck in my hands, and then I can be like, oh, okay, this is what I see up close. Seeing it on a screen is just different for me than seeing it in person. I've had decks where I'm like, I see it on the screen, I'm like, it's the most beautiful, perfect deck ever, and I get it in my hand, I'm like, oh no, that doesn't work for me. Or I've had the exact opposite happen where I've seen a deck on, you know, videos or whatnot or online, and I'm like, it doesn't really work, I don't get it. And then I get it in the hand, and I'm like, oh my goodness, now I see it. So this is why I do this. This card I've seen many, many times, and I really love this depiction. There is something about this particular card. This one I get a reaction from. This one really speaks to me on kind of a deep, maybe subconscious, instinctual type of a level. So probably something I could look at there with that, diving deeper into that card. I do really like this one too. We have the scythe here, kind of cutting down these wands, harvesting. I like the bird with the message there. I mean, really cool stuff. I do kind of like the wand suit, apparently. I think there's a lot of cool things going on in the wand suit. It does have a little bit of a clown energy to me, which I'm kind of having to sidestep because I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan. So I'm trying to focus on kind of the steampunky energy that is reflected in these cards more than the kind of clown puppety thing that it's kind of alluding to a little bit or hinting to a little bit, at least maybe on a subconscious level for me. Maybe it's bringing some shadow stuff up for me. Again, I love the moon, but that we can see the actual influence of the moon. I think that is so cool. I feel like a lot of these characters only have like, all their boobs are mishmashed. Is it just me? It's probably just me. They're like either only showing one, or they're showing like 2 on one side or 3 on one side. Like, I don't know. Is that is there something there? Maybe I just noticed it. This is interesting. Don't know about his tongue sticking out there, but I do like this Ace of Wands. I mean, that's just beautiful. I love the idea that she's holding the torch and the baby, or like we've got it, you know, she's got everything. She's got the full potential of what she's going to bring into being. And I just, that's beautiful. I do like that one. Here's our King of Cups. These two are facing opposite of each other. That's interesting. I mean, not that it really matters, but I do like this Knight of Cups where we have the figure that's kind of the sea dragon, sea serpent energy. I think that's pretty cool. I like this Page of Cups. See, it makes me giggle. That's a good thing, right? Or like tickling the little fish under the chin. I mean, that's just kind of funny. I do like this Ten of Cups, and I like that, like, it's kind of reminiscent of the Happy Family, but this is very much nobody's perfect in this little family, and I think that's awesome. Like, they're finding their perfect moment in the imperfection, and I think that's pretty cool. This one's pretty cool with the genie popping out and all the cups. I'd have to kind of sink into that again and see how that really relates to that energy of the Nine of Cups for me, but I like this one where she's walking away. She's like, nope, I'm done. I'm good. I'm walking away from all that. And that's really cool. Really interesting 7 here. Not so much of that kind of all the different choices that we usually see in the cups, but he's really focusing in on cultivating a creation out of all those cups. So that's really beautiful. Again, this is just my first impressions, and I have no idea if that's what Patrick Valenza even had in mind when he created this deck. But again, I haven't read the book. I haven't watched any walkthroughs, so I'm just going on gut reaction here. Little puppet show. That's cool. Little 5 of Cups. Okay, this one's kind of funny. Again, it makes me giggle. I think I need to just really kind of let the humor of this deck speak to me in that way. But like, he's got his finger in his ear and he's like, nah, I'm not listening to you. Right? My kids used to do that. It just drive me crazy. This is a really interesting 4 of Cups. Very much speaks to the idea of boredom, though. And that's not really how I read the 4 of Cups, but I'll be interested to see how it shows up in readings for me. I do like that she has a key here. That's pretty cool. And this 3 where they're all in the fish. Again, just amusing. Here's our 2 of Cups. I think that's quite beautiful. I love that this faces a skeleton. So I'm more into skeleton decks than like weird decks like this, but again, moon influencing. Love that, particularly in the cup suit. Okay, this is my suit, the Pentacles. I always really, really want to like the Pentacles, and the Queen of Pentacles is my card, and I do actually really like that. It is super steampunky, so that makes me happy. Oh, she's got all of her little children around her. That's super cool. Love that. It's a great Nine of Pentacles. Love the movement, but it does look kind of like it's a big kind of chunky thing, so it looks like it would be very slow moving, which is definitely how I see the Knight of Pentacles, so that's pretty wonderful. Page of Pentacles with the big tool. I think that works. Here's our 10. The playing chess. That's pretty cool. Not my favorite Nine of Pentacles, and that's definitely a card that I look for in a deck. But this is a super cool 8, and that's another card. I'm real hard on the Pentacle suits in my deck, so it's my favorite suit, and I always want to love all the cards. This one is super cool. I love that. I have seen this image many times before. I think this one's a really great image as well. Definitely tapping into that kind of charity vibe here, which, I mean, it's okay. This one with the big old eyeball. Yeah, that's kind of funny. Under 4, definitely getting that miser energy a little bit here, but that's okay. I feel like I can work around that. And our 3. He's trying the face on his head. I do really love this one. I've seen this card many, many times, and it's just a stunning image. I really do enjoy that one. Then we have the Ace of Pentacles with the dragon. I'm not super into dragons, but I think there's only been like one that I've seen really so far. So, okay. So that's a quick flip through the deck. I mean, there are some cards in here that I'm like, ew, those are super cool. And there's some cards in here that I'm like, I don't get it. So, so we'll see. We'll see how it all works out. Generally what I do now is, okay, I've looked through the deck. Now I want to give it a shuffle. Ooh, it's kind of long and skinny, so it's a little hard to get my hands around. But shuffles nicely. I do love this older US Games cardstock. I'm not so fond of the more cardboardy stuff they have now. This cardstock is beautiful. Shuffles really well. So I like to do a little shuffle after I've looked through the cards. And I'm gonna do a quick 3-card reading. And we're gonna see what we get. 3 of Wands. It gave me a card I love. That's always a good sign. It gave me all Wands. Didn't I say I really, really like the wand suit in this deck? So maybe it's just trying to reaffirm that it's gonna be good. Like, you're gonna like me, just give me a chance, right? They are beautiful on the table, right? Sometimes when you're just, you know, doing this and you're looking at cards, in some decks you're like, oh, so pretty, oh, so pretty. And then in others, you're like, once you lay them down, you're like, oh my goodness, look at that. So that's kind of where I'm at. I feel like this is definitely a deck that I need more cards, lots of cards. It's not gonna be a single card reader for me, but I love this with all the wand energy. They do look really stunning together. I do really like the color palette. Now that I'm seeing it like on the table, like as a reading, not just sitting in my hand, I do really dig the color palette. I feel like it would go really well with a lot of decks that I use kind of during the October, the kind of darker season of the year. But yeah, that's pretty cool. Okay, so I'm good with that. I feel like we're on a good trajectory here. I'm really liking this reading that I'm seeing. It's telling me kind of, you know, give it some time. Think about what it is that you want to create, you want to cultivate, and then, you know, we'll kind of come together and create that work. So I think that's a really interesting. Generally what I do at this point, after I've kind of done an initial kind of walkthrough, sometimes I do my whole resonate resist thing where I go through the deck and I'm like, these are all the cards that I like and these are all the cards that I don't like. I feel like to do that with this deck, it's not that I dislike any of the cards in the deck. So they'd all be in the, yeah, that's fine. And then there'd be a couple that'd be in the, yeah, I really, really like it pile. So I don't think that's a practice that would work super well with this deck, because I do know going into this deck that this is an artwork or an art style that I'm not super drawn to. Beautiful though, look at that. But in looking at this reading here, I'm feeling a little bit more confident that we might find our path together, that we might find our way. I'm seeing that here reflected in these cards. You know, just give it some time, give it some work, put the time and the effort in, and it's gonna cultivate something really beautiful. It's not gonna be a super fast process. It's not gonna be an instant connection. It's gonna be something that's gonna take a little bit of time and effort, but if you're willing to put it in, that it's gonna be beautiful and it's gonna be worth it in the end. So that's what I'm getting out of this first initial reading, which is fantastic. I do actually, before I pull that up, I kind of wanna just take a picture of it real quick, just so that I have it, because I might be doing some journaling with this deck for sure. And yeah, I'm feeling a little bit better about the whole idea of working with the Deviant Moon Tarot. So one of my favorite bonding things to do with a new deck is to actually modify it, to kind of make it my own in some way. Now this is already the beautiful borderless edition of the Deviant Moon Tarot, so I don't need to do any trimming. I don't think. You know, you never say never, but anyway, it's got some extra cards, which is wonderful because I can use those for testing my colors and see what I want to do. While I was at the store the other day, I just happened to be at the craft store and I was looking at the tombos, and I didn't have this deck or didn't even look it up or anything. I just kind of grabbed a couple colors that I was like, oh, those might actually work with my Deviant Moon. I also have my container of markers here that I might want to use those colors instead. So let's see, what have we got so far? I'm gonna pull these in just so we can take a look and get that light to not shine directly on it. So I think the yellow is, like, I think that would be really cool, but it's a bit too yellow. It's a bit too bright. I'm almost feeling like this color as a base and then maybe laying over my, I do have some browns too. I mean, I guess we can throw those in there. Yeah, that one's not gonna work. Then maybe layering on some, that's kind of cool. I like that one too. Layering on some distressed ink, if I could get my words out, just to kind of dirty it up a little bit. It would also be cool to do them all, right? I think what we're gonna do is start with this one, and which is actually not a Tombow, it's an Artist Loft in Wheat, but I do like that color. So I think we're gonna start with that, lay that down as a base coat, and then maybe I will distress it. So let's just color them in here. They always turn out darker on the card than they do on paper. I'm guessing that's just because the way cardstock takes ink versus the way paper takes ink. So I want to make sure this isn't going to be too dark. And again, it's going to be really hard to see on just one card. You know, just kind of going through here. I just did a search for Deviant Moon on YouTube, and might look at some that that might be of interest to me to watch while I am edging my deck. That way I can kind of get a little bit of some other people's experiences with the deck and how they've found working with it and what they think of it. So yeah, I think that's gonna work really well. It's really hard to tell with just a couple cards, but I think if I layer that as my base and then add that distressed ink over the top of it to kind of grunge it up, give it kind of this crackly look that we see on the back of the cards, I think that's going to be really cool. So that's going to be what I'm going to do today. Okay, so I got the deck all edged, and actually some of the corners weren't quite cut very well, so I actually took my corner rounder with the medium size and I clipped those up wherever they were kind of squared off and not cut all the way. So I kind of did that along the way, and here is the color that it ended up coming out. It is, again, a little bit darker than I really wanted, but I think it's gonna look okay because I think it's gonna kind of have that, what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of steampunky energy, hopefully, when I'm done. It actually matches that inner border right there pretty well, so that's okay. I'm okay with that. Again, I used the Artist Loft in Wheat, so not too bad of a match. Okay, so now what I thought would be fun to do would be to actually distress it a little bit and to give it a little bit of that kind of grungy look that the deck kind of has. And I'm gonna take probably just a chunk at a time, maybe half the deck, and I'm going to just rub on some of this. Now, sometimes I take the ink pad and rub it directly on, and sometimes I use paper towels. I do also have makeup sponges. Sometimes that works too. They're a little bit more sturdy than the paper towel is. So let's give that a try, see how that works. I don't usually use the sponges with the distressed ink. I usually use them with the Brilliance ink, the full ink pads. So we'll see how it works with this. I don't know, this might not work very well because of the nature of the ink itself, but I kind of just want to darken those corners. And it looks like maybe that's working okay. I'm just gonna do a little dark on the corners. And the one thing I always try to kind of be careful of is not getting a weird line, because that can happen. So you may notice that as I'm doing this, I'm kind of covering up the color that I originally had on here, this wheat color. it's gonna get covered up for the most part. But the reason that I do the base coat is just because otherwise I'd be trying to go over white, and that's just even harder. So this just gives me something a little better to work with. So let's just add a little bit of this brilliance. I can look and see, I do have some other brilliance colors. Like I have a copper too, but I feel like there's actually more gold yellow tone in this deck than there is the copper color. So I'm going to do a very, very light brush on. Okay, so I got it all edged. And you can see here, I've got like a multi-tonal thing going on now, which is really cool. I used the wheat for my base coat. Then I went over and darkened all the corners with the Distressed Ink Vintage Photo. And then what I did was I used the Galaxy Gold and basically a makeup sponge. And I rubbed it all across where the colors are meeting. So basically what that does is in the light, and you probably can't see it in this light, but in the light it catches just a slightly gold sheen. But what it also does is blend where my marker and my stamp meet. So rather than having the kind of harsh line where I stopped with the distressed ink and then having the marker here in the middle, gold over it helped blend that together. So yeah, I think overall, I think, whoops, catching the ring light there. I think it works. I think it actually works better with the front than it does with the back, which is not usually how I choose my edgings, but look at that. That's pretty cool. So yeah, it's all edged and ready to go. So now I can get started reading with it. So I thought I'd do a little check-in with my progress in my work with the Deviant Moon Tarot. So at this point, I have been using it for my weekly reading as well as for the shadow prompts in the February monthly medicine. So I have used this deck for the 3 readings that we did relating to the subconscious mind, and it was pretty cool. It was really a nice way to get to know the deck, was to work with it in terms of the monthly medicine. But I've also been using it for my week ahead kind of pull. I've been using the Deviant Moon Tarot as kind of my 3-card set me up for the energy for the week type of a thing. So I thought I would just do a little check-in with that because I'm getting ready to do the one for this week. And I thought we would just do it together because part of this whole thing is sharing this experience of bonding with this deck. I did pick up the big booklet because, or the big book, not booklet. This is a booklet. This is very, very basic. It works, but it's quite limiting in that sense when you compare it to this book, right? So this book is like, I mean, pages and pages and pages of information. So I will probably talk about this more when I kind of do a sort of review of it. But what I've been doing is using this deck for my week ahead pull as well as the monthly medicine. So I've actually been pairing it with the Lantern Oracle. So that's what we're going to do today. And we're just going to see how this goes. So far I've, done a couple weeks and I'm enjoying it. I've already shuffled my Deviant Moon, but I didn't think to shuffle my Lantern Oracle. So we'll go ahead and give it a little shuffle. I like to use this deck because it kind of, I don't know, it's kind of helping me relate to the Deviant Moon Tarot. I gotta tell you, like I'm still not like super sure. I've used it for, where are we, about 2 weeks in now? And I'm going into the 3rd week of working with this deck, and I'm still kind of on the fence. And I'll be honest, I'm not sure that the big book is helping. Like, it's super cool, but I actually find that if I read this deck a bit more intuitive, I feel like it works better for me. But I kind of always like to reference the big book. So let's go ahead and pull my cards for the week. So I always pull my oracle first. So we've got the Weeping Wound. You are not your wounds. Well, that's kind of a great card for the work that we're doing in the monthly medicine. I'm not doing this as a monthly medicine reading, but that is definitely kind of been the bulk of my practice so far this month. So it definitely relates. And then I pull my 2 tarot cards around it to help me kind of expand upon that message. So we've got the 9 of Swords and the Ace of Swords. So interesting. So I'm just looking at this and like on first glance, I'm throwing things across my desk. At first glance, I'm just like, you are not your wounds. You are not your thoughts. You are not like you as in me, right? Because this is like my actual reading. The stuff that goes on in my head isn't me, right? That's just old wounds talking. And seems as this deck for me for the last week has been really representative of, or I've been using it to tap into the subconscious realm or the kind of shadow self. I think that actually really works really well because I'm not my thoughts, and this is telling me this Ace of Swords because if I'm looking at this, pulling in my tarot knowledge, but also allowing my intuition to really have a big say in how I'm interpreting these cards, this is telling me kind of get yourself centered, get your thoughts in order, like get them in alignment, because like this Ace of Swords, that's the beginning of the sword suit, the suit of the mind, it's the full potential, right? Which tells me that if I'm going to get over the weeping wounds and stop repeating those same patterns, I need to start getting really clear about what is my true inner voice and what is just the fears and the played over and over again scenarios in my head that are just kind of keeping me from doing that healing work. So that's kind of where I'm at, just looking at this right off the get-go. So what I want to do is look in the book and see how far off I am, because I often find that what I pick up in these cards is not anything that's in the book, because I'm looking at this and it's telling me you're not your wounds, you're not the things that you think. You need to start getting clear about what is true and what is not within your own mind. That's my takeaway. And as this week that we're coming into, working with the monthly medicine is all about being aware of what's going on in our conscious mind. I think this is a really good reminder that a lot of what happens in my subconscious realm feeds into my conscious mind, right? It feeds into my everyday awareness. And it's constantly kind of like this little dude biting at his back. Like it's just constantly there and it's constantly nagging at me, and if I let it, it's just going to keep repeating those same patterns. So that's kind of where I'm at. Let's go ahead and look it up. 9 of Swords. Let's just cover that up because we have this big beautiful image here. It says a nervous old woman quivers in the darkness. Okay, that could be me. Awakened by a dreadful nightmare. So I've kind of been just skimming that. Depends on how much time I have, but I kind of just been skimming that. And really what I've been looking at is the upright meaning. So it says, in the gloom of the night, every shadow is suspect. When the foreboding 9 of Swords materializes in your reading, it's a dramatic sign that you are overly focused on your fears and anxieties. You may find yourself incapable of sleep as your worried thoughts loop in an endless cycle of distress. I gotta tell you, that's not me. I don't really have trouble sleeping. I sleep quite well most of the time, so it's definitely not the case for me. Horrible notions twist in your mind and heighten the suffering of your weary soul. Paranoia immobilizes your potential. Guilt and regret eats away at you without mercy, and you imagine the worst possible outcomes for the future. Irrational fixations over sickness and death relentlessly haunt you. I have chronic illness issues, so I guess, not really death, but sickness, I guess, that could be something that haunts me. These negative emotions could spiral out of control, leaving you susceptible to prolonged bouts of depression. You could also be experiencing excessive concern over loved ones or preoccupation with things you have no control over. I mean, as a mom, like I always have excessive concerns over loved ones because I'm always fretting over my kids, but like it doesn't literally keep me up at night, right? I mean, that's a very 9 of Swords energy, right? That's actually working, right? The one time that I'm going to do this on camera, right, it's going to be spot on, of course, because that is how I feel this kind of energy of this deck is. It's a little bit like, has a little bit of a trickstery energy. Just when I think it's going to do one thing, it does something different. So it's kind of interesting in that way. Okay, let's look at the Ace of Swords. The majestic archangel guides her mind against the onslaught of deception. And that's interesting. Like, it's interesting to see like what the creator was thinking as he created it. So that the kind of background information is interesting. But upright meaning, it says, feel the awesome power of the Ace of Swords rising up inside of you. Your indomitable spirit will unite with your mind, becoming a razor sharp focus for good. As your conscious bursts with new insights, it will become increasingly difficult for you to sit idly by and ignore the rampant spread of inequality in your life. Uphold your principles and defend your rights. Now is the time to turn your energetic thoughts into heroic actions. Be brave and do not fear taking the fight to the enemy. By focusing on a cause, you will be able to cut intimidating problems down to size and triumph over adversity. So there's a good example of, I don't feel like any of that actually applies. Like none of it. And I feel like that's really, really specific. And I found that a lot with this book. Like the meanings are like, a lot of times they're super specific. And I don't jive really well with that kind of a message. I actually like the, when it comes to working with this book, I like the kind of backgroundy information more so than the meanings. And then I'm kind of thinking that maybe that's something that I should start looking at more and applying more in my readings than the actual meaning that's attributed to the card in this book. So again, I'm working through this deck. I'm getting to know it. I'm, spending my time with it. So it's been interesting. I just thought we would do a check-in because again, I'm trying to share this process. So here's my reading. What did we have? Like nightmares keeping you up and go out and fight for your worthy cause. I don't feel either one of those things really apply to me in this situation, or into my reading and how I'm going to interact with this message throughout the week. Granted, I guess if I hadn't an oracle in there, right? If I was just looking at this, maybe I might have a totally different picture in my mind. But one of the reasons I like the oracle is because that's my focal point. That's really what I want to be aware of this week. And I think that this message and looking at the things actually going on in my life this week and the work that I'm actually planning on doing in terms of like the monthly medicine and other things going on, I think this is actually a very appropriate message. It feels very tapped into the energy of what's going on now for me. And it definitely feels like it is a reminder that as you're bringing forward this work into mindfulness and creating intentional awareness this week, that is our focus in the monthly medicine, that this is a good reminder that shadow stuff is still there and it's still going to be feeding into all of that. So I need to be aware of it. And that's kind of what the Ace of Swords is symbolizing to me. Like, be aware. Don't let this all influence and keep you repeating those same wounds over and over and over again, right? Get really clear, focus, and be aware. Okay, so we're back with some Deviant Moon check-in. I have been, over the last couple of weeks, doing the monthly medicine, using this deck for my readings, and I've also been doing my, what was formerly my tarot bound, and I say formally because in March, it's getting a whole new update. Well, it already got the whole new update. It's releasing in March where I will have a new expanded version of Tarot Bound, which is now called Connecting with the Tarot. I've created it or redone it and added some things, but redone it to work in a digital journaling platform as well. And so that's been really fun to have that to work with and to kind of flesh that out and work through the changes with that and actually get to know the Deviant Moon as well. So I've been doing that all throughout the month. I'm not gonna share actually what I've been working with in that document too much because, it's ended up being a little bit more of a personal experience than I really was intending it to, but I thought we would just do a check-in with this deck. And one of the things that I have also been doing in addition to all the other things I've talked about so far is I will several times throughout a week just get this deck out and I will shuffle it and I will pull a card. And I don't journal about it or anything like that. It's just kind of taking a moment to spend some time with it. I have been using the big book, and that's definitely something I get into when I pull my one card. So I thought I would just share that process. And I swear, like 9 times out of 10, I was gonna like completely freak out if that card popped up. I have gotten this 9 of Wands card. I have done this process, which has been a little bit crazy because I've actually done this multiple times throughout a week. And I would say like every third or so time that I do this, I end up with this 9 of Wands. So that this card keeps coming up for me. And I think it was one of the first cards when I did my first initial reading. It was one of the first cards that came up. And this card keeps popping up all the time for me. And so I'm really fascinated by that. And I think I really want to spend some time getting to know that. And maybe doing an actual reading with that. Maybe at the end of the month, I'll do a reading specifically with this card and use it as a focal point. So what I've been doing along the way, as well as just all the other readings that I've talked about and that I've shared so far throughout the month, and of course doing the connecting with your deck, the formally tarot bound. The other thing that I've been doing is just pulling a single card, going to the book here, reading about the card, and just using it as kind of a like mindful moment pull type of a thing. I do love this imagery. I do find that when I do these kind of one card pulls with this deck, it does seem to give me the cards that I like, right? And it's interesting because it really does kind of, in those moments, it's giving me the cards that I've mentioned before, maybe in the initial walkthrough, or I've just thought it in my mind. I really like that card every time it comes up. Those seem to be the cards I get when I do these little kind of single card readings. And when I do my readings for the deeper work, especially with like the monthly medicine, I was getting the cards that I didn't really resonate with. So I thought that was really interesting. Almost like maybe the deck knows, like it knows the deep work that I need to do, and it's going to give me those cards that I'm in resistance to, because generally for me, if I'm in resistance to a card, there's a reason. Generally on like some subconscious level, there's a reason that I'm resisting that card, or I don't like that artwork or whatever. I don't like that depiction. There's a reason for it usually. And if I dive deep beneath that, I can usually hone in on it. And the cards that I do really like, those tend to be the ones that I resonate with, tend to be the ones that come up when I do this kind of just one card throughout the week pull. I'm definitely finding that this introductory section to each card has much more prevalence for me than the meanings. So I've kind of started ignoring the meanings altogether in this book, because they are very tied into the Rider-Waite-Smith. In a lot of ways, they're very specific, and that doesn't always resonate with the way that I work with my cards. What I've found has been really, really helpful in helping me to connect with this deck and dive deeper is these little readings here. So I thought I would just kind of share that experience with you. I pulled a card for the moment, and I'm going to go ahead and read just this top portion of the book. So for the Ace of Wands, it says, "The willowy angel heralds all that is good as she cradles new life in her arms. Wrapped up in a pea pod, her infant rests peacefully while building energy for the day ahead. As morning approaches, the child's innocent face tears through the husk while his consciousness slowly awakens to the world around him. The angel carries a massive torch in her third hand. She will use it to ignite lethargic minds and spread passionate creativity. The angel has pruned the branches, showing that she is willing to forego anything she considers unnecessary for the benefit of the whole. A large beetle crawls up the torch and comes dangerously close to the roaring flame. The insect is typical of fierce qualities one must have in order to pursue a burning desire. This beetle can also represent resurrection, rebirth, and spontaneity. The angel wears a crown of succulent ivy leaves, a festive sign of prosperity. It might also represent a virtuous marriage. The large amber diamond in the center of the wreath signifies the angel's intelligence. The bunch of golden grapes that hang along the side represents her fertility as well as her personal sacrifice she has made in life. The angel's organic hair consists of long green vines and autumn leaves. Trees blooming with radiant orbs glow on top of her head, forming a lively forest that illuminates the darkness. A graceful pair of moth wings flutters on the angel's back, giving her the ability to fly across the heavens. Like a moth, she regularly navigates by moonlight and courageously follows the light of her intuitive spirit. The beautiful wings also suggest her transition from one stage of life to another. See, for me, that's powerful. That's beautiful. That has so much more impact in my readings and the way that I'm working with and getting to know this deck than, you know, what this card might symbolize in a reading. I don't really need, because it's Rider-Waite-Smith, I don't really need, you know, to know what this card might symbolize in a reading. When it shows up in a reading for me, I usually know what it's talking to, right? What it's indicating. I don't really need that in working with this deck. What I like is to know what's going on in the artwork. Why is all of these strange things depicted the way they are, and what do they mean? That has been way more powerful than any sort of divinatory message I might have gleaned from the meanings in this book, or even the meanings in the Little White Book. And so it's been really interesting to dive deep into the cards in this way, to just kind of shuffle, pull a card, read from the book. I do love that I have the big image here. Generally, I even just put the card away and I just really take in the big image, because I can see so much more of the details in here. Really look at all those individual elements that the creator has talked about in the book. And so that's been a really wonderful experience. So I just really want to share that. So I'm coming into my final week of work with this deck, and I do want to get this video out before the end of the month, because I want to be able to share this experience before I actually talk about this deck in my monthly reflections, where I kind of review all the decks that I worked with throughout the month. So before I do that, I wanted to kind of wrap this video up, and I wanted to do a little sort of wrap-up reading. And in particular, I want to look at this Nine of Wands, because as I think I mentioned, I don't know when, at some point in this video, this card has consistently come up for me in the various types of work that I have done with it. So I have read in the guidebook, I keep saying the guidebook, this is not a guidebook, it's like a coffee table book, but I'm using it as a guidebook. It says, a masked boy has found himself trapped inside an underground labyrinth. Exploring endless tunnels and climbing winding stairs was fun for him at first, but as he ventured deeper into the maze, it slowly turned into a prison. After searching in vain for an exit, he's beginning to believe that escape is impossible. Discouraged and tired, he crawls into a high ledge and rests. As the weary boy dangles his bare feet over the abyss below, he considers giving in to his bleak fate. Ivy vines creep into the labyrinth, showing that the outside world is near. Similar signs of salvation are all around the despondent boy, but he's too preoccupied with the darkness to notice. At his side are 8 wands attached to steps that ascend into the morning sunlight. The boy could easily follow these rails to freedom, but he disregards their usefulness because they are broken. A 9th wand burns like a torch from behind. Its glowing flame symbolizes the rekindling of the boy's spirit and reminds him not to quit. The fire warms his downcast spirit while giving him the power to see his predicament in an entirely new light. I feel like that card and kind of captures the energy of how I have found working with this deck, in that I feel like this was me at the start. I was like down in the depths, and I kind of was like, I don't know that I'm going to be able to work with this deck, but I'm going to be able to find my way through it. And I feel like this card kept coming up as a sign or a symbol or a reminder or a message that if I just get out of my own way, I could find my way in my work with this deck. And so I feel like that message has come through all month for me, in terms of anytime I've talked about working with the deck, or anytime I've done any sort of bonding work or trying to get to know it better or anything like that, this card always comes up. And so I thought it would be a great way to wrap up this experience, to take a look at this card and to pull a reading around it, to kind of help me wrap up or have some takeaway message for this experience of working with this deck, and maybe what I've learned. So I have already shuffled it, but we'll just give it another shuffle just real quick. And I'm just gonna pull some cards. I don't have a spread. I don't have anything in particular that I'm like a question that I'm asking or anything like that. I'm just going to pull some cards and see what comes up. Again, I'm using that Nine of Wands as a focal point or the start of the message. And I'm going to read this intuitively because that is how I feel this deck wants me to work with it. I do personify my decks. I haven't really completely honed in on this deck's personality for me, but I definitely feel like it speaks to me. It's definitely a deck that is kind of encouraging me to get out of my own way and to embrace different things. So I can actually kind of see that here reflected in these cards. So right, we discussed, this was me at the beginning of this journey. And I'm kind of looking at it as a progression, as a circling back around, which is just kind of how the reading is coming to me in the moment. So here we have the Temperance card, and really what this card is telling me right now is that working with this deck has been a kind of blending of honoring my own reading style, but also getting out of my own way. So while it's encouraged me to read it traditionally, to read it elementally, numerologically, even, with a hint of Rider-Waite-Smith, with a hint of Patrick Valenza's words, or quite a bit of influence from Patrick Valenza's words from the big book now at this point, but to also blend that with my own intuition, not to ignore my inner voice, right? To blend those two things together. And I feel like the Temperance card is really what is representing that. It's, telling me this is what you needed to do in order to connect with this deck. And then we have this Five of Pentacles down here. For me, fives are a very disruptive energy. This, again, is speaking to that idea of you need that disruption sometimes in the way that you approach your practices and your readings and things like that. Sometimes, like, I gotta just kind of keep the whole get out of your own way keeps coming to mind, but I feel like this is like me here, and this is like the Deviant Moon that's like peeking out at me from the inside going, I'm gonna show you something really cool. You just kind of gotta trust me, right? I'm gonna disrupt your normal way of doing things. You're gonna have to kind of set aside your own stuff and be willing to accept my messages and be open to looking at things a little bit differently. So definitely getting that kind of interruption to the way I normally work with a tarot deck. And then it's kind of looping me back around to, it's gonna be different, it's gonna be exciting, and it's gonna bring something new out. And I love that we have the dragon. I think this is the only dragon in the deck, if I remember correctly. And so when you have that dragon amidst these figures that are kind of that human-esque characters, and then you have a dragon. So disruption, right? But in this case, it's a disruption it's a good disruption. It's going to shake things up. It's going to bring something new to my practice, to the, physical, mundane aspect of my practice in working with this deck. And we're going to circle back around to me being ready to plumb into the depths with this deck, because I do feel like I have a better understanding of what all the fuss was about. So yeah, that has been, I think it's a wonderful wrap up for this experience. Working with this deck has definitely been an experience for me. I have, like I said, I've had to put aside a lot of preconceived notions, and I've had to kind of just take this deck one step at a time. And the funny thing is that some of the things that I would normally do with a deck to get to know it, to bond with it, kind of my normal MO, right, didn't really work with this deck. And I kind of had to adjust. And again, that's looking at that five energy, that disruption, right? I had to kind of disrupt my status quo in order to work with this deck, which was really great. I ended up using it for the monthly medicine. It wasn't a deck that I intended to use. I just kind of felt called to use it when the time actually came. And so it was really great to work with it in that way. I definitely have gained a new appreciation for it, and it's been a really wonderful experience. So I'm not going to talk about it too much here because I do want to kind of talk more and have a little bit of a more of a review of it in my monthly reflections when I wrap up the month. But I definitely want to say I do kind of get what all the fuss is about a little bit better, and I don't feel like my work with this deck is done by any stretch of the imagination. So I think we have more to do. I have more to learn. It was really interesting to do this in a sense of kind of connecting with it all month long, sharing the little bits along the way. So I hope that you enjoyed it as well. Let me know in the comments below if you'd like to see more experiences like this that are a little bit more into the everyday use of a deck, I guess, and how I'm finding it, how I'm experiencing it, and what I'm using it for. So feel free to let me know in the comments below. I would love to know what your thoughts are on this deck. Is it one that you like love, or were you like me at the beginning where you're like, I don't get it? I'm gonna be honest, there's still some cards I don't get, but that just means I have more work to do. I hope you enjoyed this little journey with the Deviant Moon Tarot, and I look forward to seeing you again soon in another video.